So we're looking at Noah's flood, and particular at this is part two, and covers chapter 7 of Genesis. So in Genesis 7 verses 5 through 7, I'll read that for you, and it says that, and Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. And then in Genesis chapter 7, verses 11 through 12, we're told that in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the deep, great deep, it says, broken up, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So in verse 11, it tells us that the fountains of the deep were broken up and the windows of heaven opened. To understand this, we need to go back to the creation of the earth in Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. And I'll read that to you. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the heaven, from the earth. This is when he was creating the earth. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. So this is where the water came from for the flood, to flood the entire earth and cover it completely. So when the fountains of the deep were opened, there were changes in the ocean floor, changes in the mountain ranges, and there was an upward thrust with areas sinking and disappearing. And then came the opening of the windows of heaven. This was the water that was above the earth in heaven. So there was plenty of water to cover the entire earth. And accordingly, we find this actually happened in Genesis 7:17. And it says, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters were increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. So, excuse me. Then in Genesis chapter 7, verse 16, we're told, and they that went in, male and female, of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. So it was the Lord that shut the ark for Noah. And it is also seen in Genesis 7, verses 21 through 24, that the flood waters killed all life on dry land, and the water was up on the earth for 150 days. In Genesis 1 through 24, we see that our Lord destroys the wicked by the flood and preserves Noah and his family from judgment. And then in Genesis chapter 6, verses 19 through 20, we've seen that the single pair of animals were unclean. But here in chapter 7, Noah is commanded to take 7 pair of clean animals. As we mentioned earlier in part 1 of this series, that he took of clean beasts, he took 2 they took to thee by 7s, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean, he took 2, male and female. And of the fowls of the air, of course, he took 7, so male and female, to keep them alive, to keep the seed alive upon the face of all the earth. So the Bible tells us that there's more than just 2 of each. The difference between the clean and unclean beast is again described in Leviticus 11, chapter 1 through 47, and Deuteronomy chapter 14, 1 through 21. Noah was to take 7 of the clean beasts and 3 male and female, and 1 odd that made 7. The odd one was to make sacrifices to God, as seen in Genesis chapter 8, verse 20. And that was after they had gotten off of the ark. And Noah built an altar, it says, unto the Lord, and took up every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And this, the reason for taking the animals into the ark was because God was going to send rain for 40 days and 40 nights to blot out everything on earth. And again, thank you for listening.